What is up? Welcome to the DFS Academy. It is week 9 in the NFL, and I bet you're getting tired of hearing this. Another star wide receiver goes down. So while we are pouring one out for Stephon Diggs, we are going to rejoice in the world of DFS because while your fantasy team probably cannot replace Stephon Diggs at week 9 of the regular season, in DFS, we can at least build a new lineup, try to make some of our money back, try to win $1 million. Let's see what we can cook up this week. What is up? Happy Friday or Saturday or Sunday morning, whenever you watch this show and you're building your DFS lineups. Welcome to the DFS Academy, Club Fantasy's weekly DFS show. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. With me, as always, Austin Amandolia. Good evening, Austin.
Yeah, how's it going? I'm feeling a little bit bothered that the NFL didn't just accommodate Halloween this evening.
Yeah.
Like, I've missed everything. All I know is the score of the game.
I was gonna say it's a relative horror show on the field right now, so you're not necessarily missing much. And maybe they were accommodating Halloween.
So. Yeah, what could go wrong? The Jets in another primetime game.
Yeah, it was. You said you only know the score. The score tells you what you need to know. We record this at halftime. It's 7-0. It's ugly. Joe Mixon looks like Joe Mixon, but if I remember correctly, he got in off of like a crazy fluke, like turnover. The crazy Malachi Corley did one of the bonehead rookie plays of dropping the ball before getting into the end zone. So it's a bonkers game that is kind of fitting for Halloween. But yeah, it hasn't been pretty. The offensive line is going to get CJ Stroud killed and may have actually going into halftime. He limped off the field. So I'm not exactly sure what's wrong with him yet, but his offensive line is getting him destroyed. Plain and simple. This is one of those days where I'm glad we're recording a show because I don't want to keep watching the game. All right, guys. DFS Academy, we're here to help you guys break down the week 9 main slate. We're going to talk a little bit about the cash games. That's Austin's expertise. We'll get into that in the first part of the show. And then in the second half of the show, we're going to compare some of our favorite tournament plays and tell you some lineups we would build using those plays. Before we get started, if you would like to play DFS with us, there are actually links in the description of this video and every other DFS product we put out, including Austin's article that drops every Saturday, where you can actually play DFS with us right now. We have contests on both DraftKings and FanDuel. On FanDuel, we only do the main slate. On DraftKings, we do every slate. So jump in there, win a little money, have a little fun. And if you win the main slate, we announce your name on this show. Also, if you don't mind, if you're new to Club Fantasy, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Helps out a ton with the YouTube algorithm. You're supposed to like and comment and do all the things the young hip kids tells you to do. But I'm just going to ask you to do it very nicely and tell you to hit that subscribe button because it costs you absolutely nothing. We start the show off with what we call answers to the test. This is last week's Milli Maker lineup. This won a person $1 million. That winning score last week was 211.66. That is about 30 points better than it was in week 7. It is still 30 points behind what we've seen as the season high. So everybody's kind of falling in that low 200s range right now. We start off with Bo Nix, a call by Austin last week. Sheepishly, I think you feel a lot better about it now, Austin.
Yeah, I wish I had leaned into it more. I was like, am I really going to go for Bo Nix this week in tournaments? And I should have been more bold about that take.
I built Bo Nix lineups because of you and cashed because of you. So I very much appreciate you making sure Bo Nix was included in the show sheet last week. So Bo Nix, James Cook, Bijan Robinson, they did a 3 running back lineup. Austin Chuba Hubbard was the 3rd running back. Lad McConkey, Jamar Chase, and Cedric Tillman. While I did not talk about Cedric Tillman as my favorite play, I did include him in my lineup. And if you watched any Club Fantasy episodes last week, I was conducting the Cedric Tillman train. So I'm taking credit for it. And another train I was conducting, Austin, though I did kind of step on your thunder here. K. Dotton was my stream of the week last week. He was my favorite tight end on this show last week. He was the tight end 1 last week. So I was very happy to see the great performance out of K. Dotton. So, and then the Buffalo defense. So of the, 9? I always forget to count these 9 players on the Milli Maker lineup. We mentioned 3 of them, Austin, but I think the big hit here was probably you with Bo Nix because I think people are scared of this kid. And he has another plus matchup this week. Not to give things away, we're going to talk about him a little bit during this show. So
Yeah, I thought the Bo Nix pick, I mean, I'm glad it panned out and it really made sense with the matchup against the Carolina Panthers. I think the interesting thing about it was the fact that the Panthers have been seen as a really great matchup for running backs. And we haven't always seen the quarterbacks get there because they can just run the ball a ton, but touchdowns are fluky in the NFL. And so sometimes it flows towards the pass game and the quarterbacks. Plus, Bo Nix has been adding stuff on the ground. I loved that Bijan Robinson ended up in this lineup too. And I want to point him out. We didn't talk about him on the show, but I did play him in a lineup or two because the game theory move is there is that everybody's playing the receivers. They're saying Tampa Bay, they can't defend the pass. And we just saw Kirk Cousins throw 500 yards against this team. And so, hey, a way to get leverage on that, pick the running back and see how it goes. And it went super well for this person.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. You've actually been hammering that a lot with Bijan Robinson this entire season, is that the sexy pick, the simple pick, and I say that because I'm about to pick him later on in the show, is Kirk Cousins with a wide receiver stack. But this team is so well-rounded, and Bijan Robinson, though not quite in the Christian McCaffrey role that we were promised before the season, Bijan Robinson is heavily involved in this offense, much to I don't want to say the chagrin of fantasy. Tyler Allgeier's involvement is still a little overblown, but for the fact of the matter is, Bijan Robinson's getting it done this year.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, guys. As I mentioned, we start off with the cash plays. If you're looking to double up your bankroll, just win some head-to-head matchups, these are Austin's speciality. He is actually going to have an article that drops for this on Saturday as well. So I always warn folks, and we a snake bite from this 2 weeks ago. Don't just build your lineup based on information we're giving you on Thursday night. I know you might watch this on Sunday, but this is Thursday night for us. Make sure you're reading Austin's article on Saturday morning or Sunday, whenever you're doing this, to kind of add on to what we're saying, because players get hurt. My favorite wide receiver got hurt in the 1 hour that we were not supposed to. We normally record the show an hour earlier, but we pushed it ahead for Halloween. And thankfully we did, or else I'd be telling you to start a guy that I don't even know if I want you to start now. Long story short is information gets old really quick in the NFL, so make sure you read Austin's article to go along with this show. But we start with top of the class, Austin. These are the higher priced plays of the week. I feel like you've been giving us the same 4 names from this segment every week, but they tend to do very well. I'm not like getting at you for giving the same names, but it just feels like for these high priced guys, it's usually the same 1 or 2 guys that are actually worth that amount of money every week.
Yeah, exactly. So we've had to get a little creative here and there, and sometimes we have to dig a little deeper to find the find the cover art for this show, because otherwise we'd just be picking the same 5 players every week. But this week at the running back position, I've got Saquon Barkley. He's $8,200 on DraftKings, $9,400 on FanDuel. He's very pricey, but I'm okay with going after it in cash. Jacksonville has allowed the 4th most points to the running back position since week 5. They've been absolutely getting hammered. Philadelphia are 7.5 point favorites in this matchup. They have a 26.5 point implied team total, which surprisingly is like 6th on the slate, because there are a bunch of high implied team totals on this matchup. There's a lot of teams that are heavy favorites. The Eagles are among them. Matchup's really good. Saquon Barkley has the role locked in, and the thing with Saquon Barkley is if they are in a close game or if they are ahead, he's getting a ton of touches. He's getting 20 touches easy. The only time that he hasn't gotten a ton of touches was when they were super behind, and I do not imagine a world where they are behind in this matchup. Not because I say that it's going to happen, but I think he's going to be highly rostered in cash lineups, and rightfully so. We're not going to talk about him in the tournament segment, but I do think he's actually tournament worthy, because I think people are going to be scared off of the salary there, and I think he could just be that good this week that he might just make or break your lineup no matter what.
Yeah. I've started to notice this because I tend to build more tournament lineups. You guys, if you watch the show for any time, you know that I play one specific contest on FanDuel just constantly, little $3 contest that I usually get like 20 entries in. And Austin, I still build it more like a tournament lineup, even though I should probably lean cash a little bit more. But I will say the lineups that I tend to do well with are the ones where I go max min and like spend up for a running back like Saquon Barkley. And then it kind of forces me to dig in and find guys like Cedric Tillman because I have to find some way to afford a guy like Saquon Barkley. And for some reason, neither site is high on Cedric Tillman this week. So another one that we get to just slide into lineups. I'm kind of giving away the story later on in the show. But no, I like Barkley a lot. And I think you're exactly right. The game script isn't going to go against him in this one. The only thing that goes against Barkley in a game script like this is like when he was playing the Giants and decided he wanted to let the younger guys come into the game instead of him. It's like, no, baby, we need those touchdowns. Get back in there. So we move. Go ahead.
I was going to say, or how about last week when Jalen Hurts just tush-pushed his way into the end zone like three different times?
So many. So I had him picked as one of my 2 touchdown specials for last week, and I'm just watching Jalen Hurts go for every touchdown. I'm like, yeah, this is not why you guys paid Saquon Barkley. If you could fix that for me, it'd be great. Next section, guys, is the $6,000 to $8,000 players. We call it the band nerds. They spend too much time on their instruments, not good enough to be top of the class quite yet. I find it interesting, Austin. I am flat out terrified of Malik Nabers in the Giants passing game, but you think this could be a week for him?
Yeah, I will. I mean, he just has the volume. He is an absolutely ridiculous volume share. And that's going to be something that keeps me interested in him almost no matter what. Now, will I end up playing him come Sunday? It's really going to depend on what kind of value opens up on the slate elsewhere. Like, I think playing Wan'Dale Robinson is totally fine. I think the thing is, honestly, Malik Nabers might be more of a tournament play as I'm analyzing this in real time, because people are going to look at the matchup against Washington and be like, oh, well, that's not really a great matchup. Well, I think it's a little bit misleading. I don't think their defense is actually that good. I think that they've played some meh teams in the recent past. So I feel like Malik Nabers can get there just on the sheer volume. And anytime a receiver is getting like 10 targets on a regular basis, he's going to be a cash line staple. So I'm not afraid of it from that standpoint. Now, he is $7,500 on DraftKings. That is pretty expensive, but I was having a hard time finding guys I liked in the middle tier, which is part of the reason too. I was like, well, you know what? I have an idea of where I can pay down at quarterback, and I have a really great idea of punting at tight end. So I'll pay up a little bit at wide receiver and get a guy like Malik Nabers that I know has the clear volume.
Yeah, the volume's certainly there. It's more a terror surrounding Daniel Jones for me. And then I'm going to compound that where you're not wrong about the Washington defense, but they seem to have turned an interesting page lately. And I got burned so hard on that Caleb Williams game last week that I'm not trifling with the Washington defense anymore. That's just how I'm looking at it at this point.
Yeah, that's fair. I blame the Chicago coaching staff more for that than the Washington defense, but I think that's totally fair. And again, it speaks to why Malik Nabers might actually be a really good tournament.
Oh, that's exactly what I was going to say is you have the double burn for Malik Nabers that he started off so hot, and you would have thought he would be, you mentioned 7,500 is expensive. I would have almost expected him to be in the $8,000 range on DraftKings at this point when you see how he started the season. But he's gotten cool, not because of his own. He dealt with the injury. He's dealing with Daniel Jones every single day of his life. But then if you have the people like me who got burned by that Chicago matchup, like there's a lot of reasons to avoid him, which again lends itself to making him an interesting tournament play as well. I might actually have to look at getting him into some tournament lineups and trying to overcome my phobia of the Giants right now.
Yeah, that's fair. Sometimes we got to face our fears, you know?
Yeah, I'll give it a try in one of my lineups this week.
But the other guy I have is Chuba Hubbard, who is, I guess, also someone to be afraid of because of the Panthers offense. But he's $6,500 on DraftKings, $6,900 on FanDuel. It's also the usage here, and the matchup's really good. New Orleans has not been playing well on defense lately. They have now surpassed Carolina as the best matchup for running backs since week 5. The Saints have allowed an average of 33 points per game to the running back position. That is 1.5 points per game more than the Carolina Panthers, who allowed the second most points since week 5. So both teams really bad. And Carolina's likely to play from behind in this, but the way that the Panthers have played, like, they don't play with a sense of urgency when they're down. They kind of just do their thing. And I think some of that's because of where they are. And in their team build right now. And I'm also, people are probably wondering like, well, what about Jonathan Brooks? Like, isn't he supposed to come back? I don't think there's a chance. I don't think he's going to get a ton of snaps, even if he does play this Sunday. We're getting mixed messages from Dave Canales. Like one day he says, oh, he might not play this entire season. The next day he says, oh, well, we have to evaluate him through the week. Okay, probably not playing this week. Chuba Hubbard probably still has this role.
If a week starts off with there's a chance he might not play this season, I don't get too worried about that player during that week. Chuba Hubbard, I think, is that enigma you mentioned. You're worried about the Panthers offense, and why wouldn't you be? But we've been worried about them the entire season, and Chuba Hubbard has continued to perform well. I feel like this game presents an interesting problem, and I was talking to you about this a little bit before the show. For my tournament running back, my initial go-to running back was going to be Alvin Kamara. And when I went to go look at my lineup, I saw the questionable tag next to him. So I wanted to go see what happened. And it turns out this is a sort of a re-aggravation of, he has like broken ribs that he's playing with from week 3. And we had this, and then a story about a broken hand last week. And so this screams, Austin, as you mentioned, team that allows the most points, team that allows the second most points to running backs playing each other. This screams that it should be a cupcake matchup for Alvin Kamara. My concern is if New Orleans gets out early in this one, why not rest Alvin Kamara, see what you have in Kendry Miller, which is something the team wants to do. Plus, wasn't it against the Panthers when Taysom Hill robbed 2 touchdowns? Like, I feel like it's always against the Panthers when that happens. And so there's a lot going on in this game that terrifies me about playing Kamara. So I ended up taking him out of my ideal lineup. But that's because there are other options. You can see someone else for the Saints scoring touchdowns. You can't see that for the Carolina Panthers. If they score, it's probably going to be Chuba Hubbard.
Yeah, that's true. Now, I will say, because of the injury concern, and Alvin Kamara has already been playing through it, I was still very inclined to be like, maybe I put him in a tournament lineup. I probably still will. There will probably be one lineup out there. I usually play across DraftKings, FanDuel, and Underdog Fantasy. I usually end up with about 6 to 8 tournament lineups, unique tournament lineups. I kind of am interested in trying one with Chuba Hubbard and Alvin Kamara because like picking 2 running backs from the same matchup, that's breaking the rules. Do not do that in cash. We're in the cash portion of the show. Do not do that. But in a tournament setting where you have this incredible matchup, you have a player who's injured or playing through injury, he could pop off. It could be a very like just run heavy, slow, disgusting game and play towards the running backs. There's part of me that's inclined to do that in like a lineup. I'm not going overweight on it, but I think to your point, the matchup makes sense, but there's all this noise that could scare people off of it that I think makes it an interesting play to still stick with.
Yeah, the story of my week so far has been noise for DFS, and I'll get to that when we get to the tournament section. Let's get to the bookworms. $4,000 to $6,000 players over there on DraftKings and FanDuel. Easily underestimated. These are the guys who are usually going to win you $1 million. In Austin, these guys won someone $1 million last week. So.
Yeah, it wasn't really on purpose that happened, but they did really quickly cement themselves as cash line staples. So first we have Bo Nix, who is $5,900 on DraftKings. He's still like not quite getting the respect that you think a guy would get after winning someone $1 million. His salary went up $300 last week, which some of that's because, you know, he played the Panthers, and of course he went up against the Panthers, and now he plays the Ravens. The Ravens defense has been a little weird. Yeah. They are scary because they were great last year, and so you think mentally like don't play players against the Ravens. Since week 5, they've allowed the second most points to the quarterback position, averaging 28 points per game allowed to that position. Denver are 8-point underdogs in this matchup. Bo Nix is going to be throwing the ball. He's only $5,900 in cash. We need him to 3x his salary. If he scores 18 points, we're good. So I'm thinking start him, get out of it.
Yeah, I like it. The one thing I'm throwing out there, when I saw this spread, when I was looking at spreads and implied totals this week, I think Vegas is making a mistake here. I don't think Baltimore is going to cover 10 points in this game. And so I wasn't on our Wednesday show, but I put in there that I think Bo Nix is a top 10 quarterback this week and that Denver covers the spread. I just don't see it happening. I think that's a little bit too big there. I think they're crediting that Baltimore defense just a little bit too much, Austin.
Yeah, I agree. Now it has been bet down per ESPN bet. It's currently at an 8-point spread, but
oh wow, yeah, it was 9.5 to open the week. That's crazy.
Yeah, and so I think people agree with you. Clearly, that's why it's trended that direction. Honestly, if this stays above a touchdown, I might still take Denver to cover. If it gets to 7-point spread or below, then I'm probably getting away from it.
I'm more livid that I didn't put money on it at 9.5, and now I have to remember right when we get off the show to go throw some money on it at 8. Hopefully, I don't even know what it is on FanDuel right now, but hopefully, I can still get that 8.5.
Yeah, well, I'm mad I didn't take the Texans money line right now, so whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And then Austin, the other guy who I was a little shocked, did not get the respect he probably deserves. The thing that got me the most is, at least on DraftKings, I didn't check it on FanDuel, he's the third highest priced Browns wide receiver still after last week.
Yeah, it was really weird. I ended up playing him a little bit because it was just like $3,300. That's nothing. And I think too, the way the slate worked last week, it kind of forced me towards Cedric Tillman.
I'll be honest with you, Austin. I know you get mad when I do this. I started every lineup with Cedric Tillman. I don't think I built a non-Cedric Tillman lineup last week. I was like, look, I'm going down with this ship, and it worked out really well for me. But I was
as
like,
long as you were knowing that you were doing it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. It's not the ignorance of the AT Perry build in my underdog lineups, but no, I just, everything about this matchup screamed good matchup to me. And I didn't understand why he was 3,300. It just seemed, it felt like that free square that we always talk about. And so I was like, I will compete against everybody who has him and everyone who doesn't have him for 3,300. So I had him in every lineup last week.
Yeah. Well, it ended up being a really great move. And he ends up, he has 2 consecutive weeks with plenty of target volume. Like he had 12 targets 2 weeks ago when they played Cincinnati, and then 9 targets again last week against Baltimore. I did end up playing him in my cash lineup, which did cash this past week. And Tillman was, in fact, 43% rostered. He wasn't quite a free square, but he was still one of the highest rostered players on the slate in cash. So it was definitely a good move and became clear throughout the course of the week. I think we just go back to him. Like, his salary has gone up by, I think, $1,000 since last week. He's now at $4,300 on DraftKings. FanDuel, they always overreact more, so he's up to $6,100 there. I'm still riding with it. A player priced below, honestly, 6K, who's getting 9-10 targets a game. Like, I'm going to smash that every single time. The matchup isn't particularly good. Like,
yeah, but to me, that makes him a great tournament play. Again, people are going to see that number, that red number 2 next to the Chargers, and they're going to be terrified of it. So
yeah, which we're going to talk about those red numbers in a bit. So and you're right. I don't mind it in tournaments either, but I think he's a fine cash play with that amount of volume.
And you mentioned your pump play of the week is a pump play. There are going to be players out there who don't know who Grant Calcaterra even plays for or what position he is. So introduce the world to one Grant Calcaterra, Austin.
Yeah, well, first off, if you're new to this show, this is the C's Get Degrees portion of the show because they're the pump plays. And yes, Grant, how did you pronounce that? Calcaterra? Calcaterra. That's hard. Two hard C's. Okay. Yes. Grant Calcaterra. He is $3,400 on DraftKings, $5,200 on FanDuel. Look, I'm paying up right now for Saquon, Barkley, and Malik Nabers. I got to punt somewhere. Yeah. Dallas Goedert, I think, has already been ruled out for this week. He hasn't been practice. He's been banged up. Don't expect Calcaterra to light the world on fire, but he did get 3 catches last week, which was great because he hit my 2.5 reception over that I took on him.
You have been loving that over for tight ends this season.
I've been really enjoying riding the reception overs because that's the fun one for me. But it's another good matchup. Philadelphia, they played Cincinnati last week, who's been bad against tight ends. Now they get Jacksonville, who's allowed the 4th most points to tight ends since week 5. So another great matchup for that team. I don't mind playing Calcaterra and Saquon Barkley in the same lineup either, just because Calcaterra has to do so little to pay off the salary.
Yeah. One touchdown catch and you're happy, and it's certainly doable this week. It's the right kind of matchup to maybe stack Philadelphia Eagles. Guys, that's going to wrap up the cash section of the show. And I remind you, do not just take advice that's given on Thursday nights. check out Austin's article. It's going to drop Saturday morning. He breaks down all of his favorite cash plays. You'll see players that were mentioned in this show. You'll see players that weren't mentioned in this show because the information is newer and better. If you want to play DFS with us, check the links in the description of this video and Austin's article. You can get into tournaments with us on FanDuel and DraftKings. You'll find links again in the description of this video. Now, we talk about the tourney plays. You're going to try to win $1 million. These are going to be some of the people you're going to want in your lineup. Austin gives his favorite plays. I give my favorite plays. Austin always gives you enough that you can start a full Austin lineup. That is how I recommend doing it. I'll give you at least my dumb logic. That's why I like the guys I want. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes it blows up in my face. But Austin, you're going with a guy who used to be a little bit too chalky for tournament lineups, but I think people are starting to get a little bit cute at this point for your quarterback. So.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Josh Allen this week. He is $7,700 on DraftKings. Wild price point for that man, in my opinion. He's $9K on FanDuel. That's a little bit tougher. I'm still fine with going there because Josh Allen, he can run the ball, as we all know. Here's why I really like this matchup. If you go to DraftKings and you look at Josh Allen, he's going to be the most expensive quarterback on the slate, and he's going to have a red first next to his name. That is going to make everybody think, oh no, don't play that man. He's got the toughest matchup in the league against the Miami Dolphins. Sure, the Miami Dolphins have technically not allowed a ton of points to the quarterback position over the season. But I want to talk to you about who Miami has played so far this season. They played the Jacksonville Jaguars, trash. They played the Bills. Okay. Josh Allen did not play well in that game, and James Cook just cooked. And
I was gonna say, if they didn't need him to by halftime. So
right. They played the Seattle Seahawks. Geno has been very hit or miss this year. When he's on, but he wasn't on in this game. Will Levis and the Tennessee Titans, Jacoby Brissett and the New England Patriots, the Indianapolis Colts with, I don't even remember if it was Joe Flacco or Anthony Richardson at that point. I think it was Anthony Richardson was back in and he was completing less than half of his passes.
That was the game where he went like 5 of 19 or whatever. So.
Yeah, they had 129 pass yards in that game. And then the Arizona Cardinals is who they played last week, who, by the way, passed for 300 yards on them. The Arizona Cardinals did that. I am fading the current narrative on the Miami's Dolphins defense because I don't think this is their performance. Their metrics are based on them being good. I think it's based on them having really good, favorable matchups for their defense. Buffalo has the highest implied team total on this slate as of this recording at 27.5 points. Josh Allen has historically dominated the Miami Dolphins, and we know when the Buffalo Bills are ahead, they just pour it on. They're not going to back off. And so if Josh Allen ends up scoring 30 points, which he is easily capable of any week, he will be the highest scoring quarterback on the week, and playing him will get different. I maybe stack him, but honestly, I'm interested in just playing him and getting out of this game because to me, like, I can't tell exactly how the receiver room is falling still. And so I could see Josh Allen just throwing like 4 touchdown passes to 4 different people. Yeah. And I don't feel good about the Miami side of this in this matchup in order to bring somebody back with him. Unless it's one guy that I don't think you're going to talk about on the show, but somebody that you mentioned in the pre-recording was Devon Achane. Yeah. I do have some interest in bringing back with him because he just is always really explosive. But I'm currently planning to play Josh Allen naked and just get out of this matchup with him alone.
Yeah, Achane, just to kind of talk about my process, Achane, I had to go to my 3rd or 4th favorite running back for the show. People smarter than me were talking about how the Buffalo defense looks like they're terrible against running backs. But if you go look, they got beat up by 2 really good running backs, and that's kind of like influenced their score a little bit. This could be a great game for Achane, but there was enough risk for me that I don't trust him in the tournament setting that I feel like I'm just kind of burning my money at that point. So I decided not to go with him. I wanted somebody a little bit safer who's at a similar price point to him. I really wanted Kamara, but again, everything just kind of scared me off of him, and I'll probably fit him back in later. But yeah, you brought him up. I think Allen Achane is a fun lineup, and there's probably a lineup I'll put together that has those 2. I won't have the highest expectations for it because I'm just not sure how that game's going to go. But you also bring up He could throw to 4 different wide receivers. He could also just rush 4 touchdowns in. It's a very possible Josh Allen stat line. And then all of a sudden you're like, why did I stack him with anyone? You mentioned the high implied totals, and that's why I'm kind of leaning on Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons. And that's why I have him listed as my favorite quarterback for the week. And part of that is it's a high implied total and it's also a close spread, which is something I've learned from you from kind of learning more about DFS this year. I think they're probably going to have to throw a lot. I also think there's this mystique of the Dallas defense, which they certainly do not deserve this season. They're actually one of the worst fantasy defenses. They've given up, I think, in their last 4 games, the 9th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. These guys can be beaten relatively easily. And then the other thing is Atlanta hasn't played that well. I think Dallas might actually be able to get something going on offense. So I'm expecting a higher scoring game here. And this is not going to be people's favorite game to pick on, Austin. So I feel like with Kirk Cousins coming off a rather mediocre week where Bijan Robinson took over, Kirk Cousins could be a play that not a lot of people are looking for that maybe I can get a little bit of leverage.
Yeah, I do like that. Atlanta started with the highest implied team total on the slate, and this game started with the highest over under. Well, it still has the highest over under.
Yeah.
But it started even higher. It started at 52 points. It's been bet down to 51.5 points. I would still take the under just because the metrics say whenever the over under is above 50 at closing, you should take the under. Statistically speaking, you would be positive over the past several years if you did that every time just blindly. But I do think going with Kirk Cousins in this matchup is a totally fine way to do it. I agree with your point about the mystique about the Dallas defense. I also think it's another interesting Bijan Robinson week for the same reason that he won. He was in the Milli Maker winning lineup last week.
And then your first, we're moving on to the running backs now. Your first running back, Austin, I had him in my final lineup salary-wise, but then I found somebody I liked a little bit better, so I took him out. So that means he's probably going to pop, and I'm going to be full of regret. So
yeah, so I honestly really struggled with the running back position this week. It's just the salaries are a little bit tough. There's a lot of guys clustered at the top that have really great matchups and have really high salaries. And then there's kind of a gap where like some of the mid-price guys I don't really love. So, and honestly, there's been no cheap running backs that I've like fallen in love with ever this year. So unless some injury pops up, probably won't be doing that. But Chase Brown is $5,900 on DraftKings. He's $6,300 on FanDuel. It's basically the cheapest running back I could find that I liked. That's not why I picked him, but it is also true. The Bengals, they have a decent matchup. The Raiders have allowed the 12th most points to the running back position since week 12 or since week 5. So that's pretty good. They're 7-point favorites, and they do actually have one of the highest implied team totals on the slate. It's up at the 5th highest at 26.75 points. Big fan of that. And Chase Brown just owns this backfield right now. He's getting the majority of the touches. Zach Moss has been largely phased out. And so I'm betting on that. And I really like this matchup. And I like the Bengals to lead in this matchup. I will save my tight end conversation about this until we get to the tight end spot.
Yeah.
The other guy I like, though, is Kyren Williams, who is $8K on DraftKings, $8,900 on FanDuel. The reason I like this is as a pivot off of Saquon Barkley. I mentioned that I think Barkley is a great tournament play as well this week because he could just be that guy that does so well that it doesn't matter. You eat the chalk in the tournament and you get different elsewhere, which please do. Remember, you don't have to be different everywhere. The Milli Maker winning lineup, they had a player who was 35.2% rostered in their lineup last in KDOT. And so feel free, eat the chalk somewhere, especially if you're not playing the Milli Maker, you're playing in smaller tournaments. It's totally acceptable to do. But if you're deciding there's other chalk you want to eat and you want to get different at running back, I like Kyren Williams because he's in a very similarly good matchup. He's getting ridiculous volume. And unlike Saquon Barkley, Kyren Williams is getting the volume no matter what. If they are ahead or behind, Kyren Williams is going to get 20 touches a game. They're playing the Seattle Seahawks, who have given up the 5th most points to the running back position since week 5. It is a very close spread, so he could get some pass game utilization. But my thinking here is, let's say we have a repeat of last week. Jalen Hurts runs the ball in a lot, or maybe this is a A.J. Brown week. Kyren Kyren Williams could end up being the differentiating running back if he scores 2 touchdowns and gets 100 yards off of 20 touches. So it's really just a pivot move off of Saquon Barkley, but I do like both in tournaments.
I think Kyren Williams is on a streak of 10 consecutive regular season games with a touchdown, looking to make it 11, and it's a good matchup for that to happen. I think that's a great pick at any week, is just saying, yes, Kyren Williams is going to score a touchdown. So you have that safe floor out of him, because a touchdown and the yardage he's going to get is going to pay double his salary pretty easily, and he's involved in the passing game. Plus, I was going to talk about this when I got to my favorite wide receiver section. Puka Nacua left practice today with a knee injury. They're saying it's not serious, but not serious to me means we're not losing him for the entire season. It doesn't mean we're not losing him for week 9, and then all of a sudden that opens things up for Kyren Williams once again too. So
yeah, exactly. I'll also just shout out this on FanDuel. Like, he's $8,900 on FanDuel, so he's even a bigger price jump from Saquon Barkley on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings, which is another reason that, especially on FanDuel, where touchdowns are more valuable, catches are less valuable, playing Kyren Williams could be a really good pivot there as well.
Yeah, and then for me, I'm going Jahmyr Gibbs, and it's mainly because I didn't know who else to go with. I'm looking at my running back rankings, and I'm like, well, I like this guy. And I mentioned 2 of their names already, Alvin Kamara, Devon Achane. And I just didn't know who to go with, but there's Old Faithful. And so I'm willing to pay up for Jahmyr Gibbs in a PPR format. And obviously we talk a lot about DraftKings, but Jahmyr Gibbs is starting to find the end zone a lot easier as well. Yeah. And he's definitely taking more of a workload. I think David Montgomery only had 33 yards last week, to where I just feel like Jahmyr Gibbs is a safe play every single week, but he's not overly priced. You mentioned Kyren Williams. I feel like Jahmyr Gibbs and Kyren Williams could be mentioned in a similar situation. Jahmyr Gibbs is 400 less on DraftKings, 300 less on FanDuel. He's just a little bit cheaper version of that, with maybe a better passing upside, which plays to his benefit on DraftKings. So Jahmyr Gibbs is the guy I'm looking at, is going to be the anchor to my lineup, much how you're talking about Kyren Williams. I think Jahmyr Gibbs, like Kyren, could easily score 2 touchdowns this week, and it's a guy I'm going to be happy I have. So.
Yeah, I like the move. I think it's good too, because I think people will want to target this game. It is one of the more interesting games of the week. They have the 3rd highest over under in that Detroit Green Bay matchup. And I think people are going to want to play the pass catchers because of the total line and because it's a close spread. But Jahmyr Gibbs is a great play. I think too, like, the matchup is actually decent. Like, Green Bay's been giving up more yards, more points to running backs in the recent weeks, but it's not good enough that, like, people are going to be like running to play Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, and you kind of hit it on the head. I also think this is a lineup where people are going to feel like they can finally play Sam Laporta, so that might yank them away from Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit, because Laporta was finally good last week and then has a good matchup again this week. So this feels like the week, like, I have to get a Sam Laporta lineup, because if not now, then when? And so that's just kind of the situation where you got to build something around this guy eventually. So.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, moving on to wide receiver. Austin has 4 of them for you. I technically have 1, but there's a guy that I have to mention for FanDuel. We'll get to that in a moment. But Austin, again, I have Chicago Blues right now, so I would love to build a lineup with Roma Dunze, however you pronounce it. Tell me why I should.
Because he's a good player, and they should be playing him more. The issue is there's no guarantee that they will play him more.
Yeah.
But I think that they're going to start to realize, like, this guy is good. He has a connection with Caleb Williams. Let's get him the dang ball. He had 6 targets last week. It's not a ton, but honestly, some of this too was the price point. Like, if you've been tracking at this point, I'm playing Josh Allen, I'm playing Kyren Williams in the lineup. Those are 2 really expensive guys. So I've got to figure out where else in my lineup I'm going to get some cheap guys in. So I'm kind of going a lot of mid-tier players. And I think Roma Dunze is in an interesting position where people are not going to be playing him and not going to be excited about him. But he has a good matchup against the Arizona Cardinals, who have averaged 35 points per game allowed to the receiver position since week 5. It's a 1.5 spread, so should be back and forth. Chicago has a 21.5 point implied team total. Honestly, if they get there, I think that'll be a successful day for them after what just happened. And I think I just think he's a talented guy, and he's $4,900 on DraftKings. Like, if he gets in the end zone, we're going to be fine. So I'm going for it there. Another cheap guy that I'm intrigued by is Jalen Tolbert. He's a little bit more expensive. He's $5,100 on DraftKings, $59 on FanDuel. Very similar to what you were saying earlier about that game environment. Like, I think I'm going to want some access to this Dallas-Atlanta game one way or another. I think a lot of people are going to play CeeDee Lamb because we started to see him get the ridiculous volume like we got used to towards the end of last year coming out of the bye week. I think that narrative is going to continue. I do think he's cash viable. I think he's a good tournament play as well, but I want to try and pivot off of that and go with Jalen Tolbert, who has seen spike weeks and targets here and there. And like you mentioned, 51.5 point total line between the two teams in this matchup and a close spread. There should be plenty of passing to go around. So Jalen Tolbert should be able to get some action in this game. And similarly to Rome Odunze, if he scores a touchdown, it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't done a lot of correlating and stacking so far, so it's time to do that. I have Jacoby Myers in here in my player pool, who is $5,300 on DraftKings, $63 on FanDuel. This is a bring back on the Chase Brown play earlier. I was trying to see, can I find some correlation here and there that I like? I actually do like it with Jacoby Myers. I was really big on Jacoby Myers in the preseason. I thought he was going super underrated given the way that he had performed, even with Devontae Adams in the lineup. But now with Devontae Adams out of the lineup, he's coming off of a week where he had 7 targets, 6 catches, 52 yards and a touchdown. That's not lighting the world on fire, but in DraftKings scoring,
yeah,
that was 18 points. And at this price point of $5,300, that hit, right? So it's a better matchup this week too. The Bengals defense, not good. They cannot rush the passer. That's not good for their pass game. Somehow they were able to make Patrick Mahomes make some mistakes, but here, or I'm mixing up teams that played last week. But point being, yeah, it was the Raiders that got pass rushed by the Kansas City Chiefs last week.
Yeah.
And yet Jacoby Myers still was able to get 6 catches out of it. The Bengals have no pass rush.
I have to say the Chiefs are a much better pass rush than what they faced last week. So
yes, that's where my brain was.
Or what they're facing this week. Yeah, we're both just jamming this whole thing up. Jacoby Myers, good play.
Play Jacoby Myers.
Yeah.
I think he's got the volume and the matchup is really good. And then I am also looking at Brian Thomas Jr. I can't remember who he's correlated with this matchup. Philadelphia. So I have a Philadelphia player coming up. Spoiler alert. Brian Thomas Jr., he's $6,600 on DraftKings, $7K on FanDuel. This one's interesting. He's been really good throughout the season. He hasn't hit a wild ceiling game yet. He hasn't had a 30-point game. He's been kind of riding that 20-point game, a lot of consistent target volume. But Christian Kirk is now out for the season. So that's one less pass catcher to soak up targets in this matchup. So I think Brian Thomas could just even have a little bit more usage. I'm not saying he's going to take all of the Christian Kirk usage, obviously, but if he's even getting another catch or 2 per game, that could be really crucial for his utilization. And at this price point, it's such a good role. The Eagles defense, I will say, they have been playing better in recent weeks. So that is one consideration that might make you shy away from this, but Jacksonville is going to be down in this game. They're going to be down almost guaranteed. They are 7.5 point underdogs. Honestly, I'm not touching that line because Jacksonville has not shown that they can keep up with anybody. So because of that, I'm looking for Brian Thomas to really get a bunch of targets in garbage time. And as the Jaguars are trying to come back in this game.
I do want to pour a little water on Brian Thomas for you.
He does have a questionable. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah. I was going to throw out there because when he initially got hurt, they said 2 to 4 weeks. He did get a limited practice in this Thursday, and they have not come close to ruling him out yet. So.
Yes. I was going to say, you need to check the Friday injury reports to see what's going on there, because if he is ruled out, obviously don't play him. If he's ruled out, it opens some interesting punt play options on the Jacksonville Jaguars side. Because
that's what I was going to ask, is Gabe Davis and Parker Washington become a little bit more interesting if Brian Thomas does not play?
Yeah, I probably lean Parker Washington because I don't trust Gabe Davis. But
Parker Washington in Parker Washington in his first game last year when he came in for Calvin Ridley, I believe, or maybe it was Christian Kirk. Hopefully it was Kirk because that's who's hurt now. He, I think, had a really great game for his very first game, and then he just was terrible for the rest because it was a guy who you hoped would come out and establish himself. But maybe this will be that first game thing where these guys tend to come in and have these really great first games and then fall off. And so I think Parker Washington is an interesting play, even if Brian Thomas plays, because I think Parker Washington may slide into that Christian Kirk role and make himself a little bit more interesting if you're really bad on salary.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point, given the slot role that Christian Kirk usually plays.
Yeah, not that you want any part of the Jacksonville offense right now, except for maybe Evan Ingram and Brian Thomas. For wide receiver, obviously, I don't normally pick my stack as my favorite wide receiver, but again, this was a situation where there were players I liked, and then I got scared off by him. The first and foremost was Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua was my pin here, and then the knee injury popped up. And I'm just worried about how they're going to use him for week 9. And so I looked around at a few other guys and I couldn't quite come up with someone I loved. And so I ended up settling with, I like the stack. I'm going to go with Drake London. And again, this was a situation where the run game took over last week. Darnell Mooney is another great one if you want to build one with Cousins and London, Cousins and Mooney. They're using them pretty well, but London seems to be the better PPR play. And so that's why I'm going to lean on him at a very manageable price point, at least on DraftKings. 6,700 on DraftKings, jumps up to 79 on FanDuel. So about where you would expect them to be. And then the one I had to talk about, Austin, is Josh Downs. Josh Downs is in the Sunday night game, which means he is only playable on FanDuel, but he will be in any FanDuel lineup I build.
Yes.
Joe Flacco is the starting quarterback now. And if you guys don't remember what Josh Downs did with Joe Flacco, that would be 8 catches for 82 yards and a touchdown, 9 catches for 69 yards, 7 catches for 66 yards. Oh, Anthony Richards comes back, 1 catch for 3 yards. Now, I will give Anthony Richardson a little bit of credit. 4 catches for 109 yards and a touchdown last week, and the touchdown did come from Richardson, and it was technically a second touchdown that got called back. So Richardson unlocked Downs a little bit last week, but I think we're going to see it great with Joe Flacco. Austin, I cannot wait to build some FanDuel lineups with $6,900 Joe Flacco. And Josh Downs. So.
I pick players that you can play on both DraftKings and FanDuel. So I often overlook the players in the.
I do the same thing for the show, yeah. So.
Because FanDuel, they just started doing that this year too, which I think at some point, like, we may just need to have separate articles for it.
I was going to say we may need to have a separate article, or at the very least for our show, if this is going to stay a thing, we may need to add a segment just to talk about these guys.
Yeah.
So.
But if I'm playing, I will be playing cash on FanDuel. Josh Downs would be in every single one of those lineups for every reason you just said.
Yep. As we move on to the tight end, Austin, obviously you like your punt play, but I wanted to ask you about your more expensive play here. So he has Grant Calcaterra again. You mentioned Jacoby Myers. Is this an either or with Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers, or is this an and situation with the 2 Raiders pass catchers?
Yeah, it's definitely an either or. So a little bit behind the scenes here. As I was going through my players, I don't just go down and say, okay, quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight end. Like, I'm actively building a lineup as I'm picking my players to help myself think through, like, because again, I want to pick players that you could plug directly into your lineup if you so desire. I don't always recommend doing that because, again, we record this on Thursday nights. Things will change. But that's how I think about it to try and make my advice the most actionable. So I was going through and I started with quarterback Josh Allen. I picked Kyron Williams. And then I was like, well, I can't figure out what receivers I like. So let me go pop down at tight end and figure out who do I like there, and then see where my salary is left over. And Brock Bowers just jumped off the page. I loved the matchup. I think currently Cincinnati is allowing the most points to the tight end position. It is really bad. They've allowed 23 points per game to the position since week 5. That is ridiculous for tight ends. So I thought, yeah, I actually really love this. Get Brock Bowers, who's going to be probably a little chalky in tournaments, and pairing with Chase Brown, who might be less so. And just as I went through and built my lineup, it was impossible to do because there are no good receiver punt options. And if you're paying up for Allen, Williams, and Bowers, you have to punt a couple of players at receiver. I just didn't feel comfortable doing it, so that's why I ended up going to Calcaterra. But if you end up able to build a lineup with Brock Bowers, I think he's a fantastic play. It just so happened that also Calcaterra is a correlation with my Jacksonville Jaguar with Brian Thomas or maybe Parker Washington.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, specifically on FanDuel, this is normally the other way around. I love things on DraftKings. Mark Andrews is way too cheap right now. Over the last 3 weeks, they have gotten their offense going. I was looking up these stats for Lamar Jackson, and he, in his last 5 games, Austin, is averaging like 32 pass attempts and 300 yards or something like that. And then during that same span, Mark Andrews is now the tight end 3 over his last 3 weeks. We've just seen really good play out of the Baltimore passing game. And yet Mark Andrews is like the 8th highest priced tight end. And so this feels a lot like what we were talking about last week with Tyreek Hill. If I can get Mark Andrews this cheap, I'm going to find a way to get Mark Andrews into my lineup. And then the other thing is, this isn't going to pop as one of those green matchups that people might be looking for, but you kind of stole my bit here, Austin. When you look at the tight ends that, wow, I'm just completely drawing a blank right now. On Denver, on who Denver is playing right now. They played Noah Fant, Pat Fryermuth, who got his 4 catches for 39 yards, Austin. But when they played good tight ends, K. Dotton, 7 for 47. Next week, Tyler Conklin did nothing. Next week, Brock Bowers smashed 8 for 97. Next week, Will Dissly did nothing. Next week, Foster Moreau did nothing. Next week, Tommy Tremble did nothing. They're beating up on bad tight ends, but when they face the good tight ends, good things happen. And I think Mark Andrews is going to fall into that. I also think that people are probably going to be scared off that they went out and got another wide receiver, and all know that's even fewer targets for the tight ends. But the offensive coordinator, I believe it was, came out after this game and basically called Deontay Johnson after this trade and called Deontay Johnson a depth piece. They said they like where they are with Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and their tight end rotation. So I don't see many things changing in this offense except for Nelson Aguilar probably no longer has a role. And I think this is going to be a nice week for Mark Andrews.
Yeah, pouring out for Nelson Aguilar. Like, geez, I love playing him in showdown slates.
Yeah,
when Baltimore's involved. So that'll
he was always good to sneak in a touchdown, but that's the new Deontay Johnson role. Pour one out for Deontay Johnson. Truthers like Josh Hudson. And Austin, the lineup is not complete without a defense. And we picked 2 of my favorite defenses. I did not have the extra $100 to pay up for your defense.
I'm about to pivot on you. So I'll just say I did originally pick the Philadelphia Eagles because I think they should beat up on the Jacksonville Jaguars, but I don't tend to play a defense that is going up against one of my players, and I was trying to get that stack. So I mean, honestly, I think that Brian Thomas and the Eagles could still both get there together. Yeah. But this is why you try different lineups and see what happens. I decided, let's go with the New York Giants.
Yes. So I want to hold on a second. So I want to let everybody know before the show, this was the first team I brought up to Austin that I wanted to make my favorite defense, but I was scared because all the statistics tell us not to. And he said he had the exact same thought. So I'm so happy that you're making
this. Some of it was salary. So they're
so cheap
on DraftKings. And if I
don't know if people heard because I started talking. We're talking about the New York Giants taking on the Washington Commanders.
Yes, the football Giants. If I play the Giants, I can get Josh Allen, Kyron Williams, and Bijan Robinson in my lineup. I love that. I love being able to do that. And the Giants, even though they've been a bad team, they don't have a defensive performance under 2 points this year. Like they've been able to maintain a safe floor because they have been getting a ridiculous number of sacks. Now, Jaden Daniels, Brian will tell you, doesn't take sacks. I think this week he does.
He doesn't take a lot. Here's the thing. He hasn't played a team like the Giants. The Giants are on pace for 74 sacks this season. That is obscene right now.
It is. It's wild. And I will say one thing that went overlooked in the Washington-Chicago game is Jaden Daniels didn't score a touchdown until a fluky Hail Mary throw that never should have been a touchdown because, oh my God, how do you play that bad of defense on a Hail Mary throw?
Well, you're too busy talking to the crowd.
Yeah, like it was the most fluky thing. So part of me is like, he's not 100%. Maybe he's healed up enough over the past week, but he's dealing with a rib injury, and that's hard to play through. So I'm intrigued by the Giants this week in this spot.
As am I. Just putting it out there, folks. Build a lineup with the Giants, and you're going to be shocked by how much fun you can have with the rest of your lineup if you have any faith. If you believe sacks are the gasoline for a defense, it's what you're getting from the Giants. It's just, can they do it to Daniels? I will have Giants lineups without a doubt. And honestly, I'm going to tell you my favorite defense is the Buffalo Bills, and that's mainly because what they did against Miami the last time these two teams played. So these guys played in week 2, and it was the week where Tua went down, but Tua was awful before he went down. So they only had 2 sacks in that game. They had 3 turnovers. All 3 were interceptions and a defensive touchdown. I'm 90% sure Tua threw all 3 of those interceptions. The Dolphins only scored 10 points in that game. The long and short of it is Buffalo may have Miami's number, and that's a defense I'm willing to gamble on. But Austin, I'll tell you right now, I'm probably going to start my lineups with the Giants. And then after I get the players that I'm really happy about, if I have salary left over, then I'll pivot from the Giants. But if it comes to a situation where I don't have salary left over, I'm not going to be mad that I have to play the Giants. Like, it's not the worst thing in the world. So I like it.
And honestly, it's not the worst thing in the world in cash. Like, defense, especially in cash, more often than not, does not matter. And so punt it off a cliff with a team that has a decent floor. I don't foresee them getting like super blown out and like giving up 30 or 40 points in this game. Also, the Commanders at times haven't even shown the ability to do that. It's taken like particularly bad defenses to do so, which the Giants really aren't one of those. So I'm fine with it in cash.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And like I said, you got a team that hits the quarterback a lot going up against an injured quarterback. Who's to say we don't see Marcus Mariota again in this game? And I don't know. There's a lot to like about it. I love that we spent more time talking about your favorite defense that wasn't even on the show sheet than we did anything else. But a lot of good defensive plays this week. I noticed that when I was building my stream of the week list as well. So there's a ton of good defense out there. Have some fun with it. Don't be afraid to not pay up. Austin, I noticed on FanDuel, I don't know who it is off the top of my head, another defense over $5,000 this week. And I think it might actually be Baltimore against Denver, which I would never touch. It's just a stupid pricing. I might be wrong about that. I don't know that I am, but regardless, another one over 5,000. This is 2 weeks in a row where I just never know. Oh, it's Minnesota. Okay, that makes a little bit more sense because you expect Joe Flacco to maybe turn the ball over a little bit, but still 5,200. Don't do it. Like, plain and simple, folks. Don't do it. And even New Orleans, a defense that everyone wants to play, is the $5,000 defense over on FanDuel. And again, it's just not something I'm going to touch this week. All right, folks. As we wrap up the show, we call it the Valedictorian Shootout. This is Austin and I's head-to-head lineup. We use DraftKings scoring. This may or may not be the lineup we're playing against you guys over on DraftKings. It won't be for Austin. It usually is for me because I forget to go change it. Last week, Austin, I got you by 12 points. Quarterbacks killed us both. One of us had Jordan Love. Can't remember who the other one had, but it was a bad. Oh, you had Caleb Williams. I had Jordan Love. You had Caleb Williams. We got killed by our quarterbacks, but tight ends saved us. We did really great with tight ends. I think the saving grace for me was Cedric Tillman. So Austin, it knocks you to 2-6. You're not doing great on these matchups, even though if you go look at what we're doing actually on FanDuel and DraftKings, he kills me every week. So Austin, my lineup this week, again, you're going to hear players that we mentioned throughout the show. So it's Kirk Cousins, Jahmyr Gibbs. My second running back is DeAndre Swift, Austin. Inexplicably, he has earned and kept that job in Chicago where everybody thought it was going to end up Roschon Johnson's job. Roschon Johnson seems to be taking the goal line work, but in DraftKings scoring, I'll take DeAndre Swift, who seems to be heavily involved in the passing game. Drake London, Romeo Doubs. I never know what Green Bay receiver to start, but Dobbs is the one I can afford. And again, I like the scoring environment of that game. Cedric Tillman, obviously. And then I wanted my piece of Bo Nix. So I'm going to take Cortland Sutton, who seems to be his number one target. And then, as I mentioned, Mark Andrews and the Buffalo defense.
Yeah. So we're about to cancel this segment, frankly. Okay, so I said last week if I lost, I was going to start using my tournament lineup. So yep. I'm going for it this week. I've got Josh Allen at my quarterback spot. I'm going with the 3 running back build: Bijan Robinson, Chase Brown, and Kyron Williams. And then my receivers are Jacoby Myers, who's at $5,300, Jalen Tolbert at $51, and Rome Odunze at $4,900. So a lot of mid-tier wide receivers. You can guess probably the rest of my lineup from here. Yeah. Tight end, Grant Calcaterra. Is his name Grant? Yeah, his name is Grant. It's just
he's new on the
I
scene.
feel like we're playing a guy named Grant Calcaterra in our.
I was gonna say, I told you you were gonna have to introduce people to him. I didn't realize that I had to introduce him to you.
And then the New York Giants, again, $2,300 is my defense.
A very top heavy lineup for you there. So yeah, this is definitely different. For anyone who may be new to this show, last year we had 3 hosts on this show, and Austin handled cash and Kelly handled tournament. And Austin blatantly handed Kelly her ass every single week because Kelly was putting these tournament lineups out there that weren't really ready to play with a cash lineup. And Kelly loved to go 2 tight ends. And Austin, one of my losses this year was when I did my ode to Kelly with 2 tight ends. So clearly that is not the way to build a DFS lineup ever, folks. There should never be a moment where 2 tight ends are in your lineup. Don't do it, except on apparently tight end appreciation day where they score every touchdown in the league. But that only happens once a year, so don't do it again. Folks, that's the end of the show. Join the class. You guys can play with us. As mentioned, there are links on DraftKings and FanDuel. Last week's winner on DraftKings was OTA Top Troy. That is his 8th win all time, 173 points. That's a pretty good turnout for our tournament. He beat the next closest scorer by 40 points, and I was 3rd and was like 1 point behind that person. So he took down DK without an issue. And then P for Shizzle, it says it's his first win of the year. He's been playing with us for a while. Maybe they use the same name over on DraftKings because I would have swore they had a win already. I felt like we've talked about him on the show already, but 154 points in our FanDuel contest. Those were last week's winners. If you want to join, check the links in the description of this video. Maybe we'll mention your name next week. Austin, please let them know where else you can find DFS content here at Club Fantasy.
Yeah, so catch us here every Friday on the DFS Academy to get our cash and tournament takes. Catch me and Josh Hudson every Thursday morning breaking down the Thursday night showdown slate, so you can do something a little bit different with your lineup. And then, as always, catch my cash article, which releases on Saturdays. And I will reiterate once again, I write that article Friday night, so it is after most of the Friday injury report updates have been announced, and a lot of players are already ruled out unless they're going to be a game time decision. So it is the most up-to-date information you will get from me.
There you go. And if you guys are looking for lineup advice, we don't just do DFS here at Club Fantasy. We actually cover everything from Dynasty, best ball when it's best ball season. But we have our redraft shows. But more importantly, if you're looking for start sit advice, this show drops every Friday at 11 or 9 in the morning. Every Saturday at 11 in the morning, we have Start Sit Different Day, which is a 1-hour show where all we do is answer your start sit questions. We have no show sheet. We have no agenda. If you guys don't ask questions, it's a very boring show. We go live every single Saturday on YouTube. Make sure you guys check that out. And then every Sunday, we do this thing where we tag all of our writers on a Twitter thread where you guys just ask lineup questions and all of our writers chime in and try to give you great information. And they gave some really great information last week. People are coming back to us now for more information already this week because of the information they got from us last week. So I don't mean to tune our own horn, but we did really, really good last week. In fact, your boy was the number 10 ranker in Fantasy Pros contest for week 8. So hopefully I can keep that going. It was a fun week. I hope you guys have fun building your lineups. I hope we gave you some great information, but for the best information, check out Austin's article on Saturday, and we will see you next week.